Awesome. Hello and welcome everybody to the afternoon section of this track. Please file in from out in the hallway, grab a seat. There's always lots of seats right down here at the front, so don't worry, I don't think they'll call on you during their presentation.
I don't know, maybe.
No promises made. All right, so we'll go ahead and get started with RatGPT with Dr. Sergio and Laura. Give them a round of applause, please.
Thank you.
So hello everyone and welcome to our presentation of RatGPT turning online LLMs into proxies for malware attacks. So first of all, we would like to thank Microsoft BlueHat for the possibility of being here today. So who are we? So my name is Laura Plein. So I'm a research associate and tech educator at the Luxembourg Tech School. So I've always been passionate about machine learning and its applications. So I've worked on language models, for example, for Luxembourgish, but I also used on machine learning applications in software engineering. But most important today, we are doing a lot of research on the implications of machine learning in the cybersecurity domain, which also leads to the research that we are going to present today. So for the research that we are presenting today, we have Mika, who unfortunately cannot be here today with us. So Mika is currently a master's student at University of Luxembourg, and he's also an amazing researcher in AI and cybersecurity at the Luxembourg Tech School. So he has always been passionate about threat intelligence, and he has participated in many cybersecurity competitions, and he keeps also organizing Capture the Flags to also motivate the younger generation to continue in cybersecurity.
And then it's me and Sergio Coronado. I have more than 30 years. After 30 years, you normally stop counting. I'm the older of the teens, so, or the senior one, that sounds better. At the same time, I have more than 20 years career at NATO. And in parallel, I created the nonprofit Luxembourg Tech School to help the future generation in Luxembourg to enter in technology, including cyber. And I have a lot of time of my life learning because I like to understand things. And just a small disclaimer that this research has no relation or views with NATO. It's related to the Luxembourg Tech School. So this is a little bit what we're going to cover in this presentation. I'm going to give you motivation, how we ended doing this research and how we enter into more AI security or misuse research for those of you that are not in the domain and probably want to enter, give you some ideas how we did it. And then Laura will cover a little bit more this particular exploit that we will with the LLMs, and how we also started there, related work, initial work, and the real RatGPT, how it works, and the implementation, and then a small demo of how it works with the video. And then I will cover mitigation strategies. The idea always when you do research on cybersecurity is you study something, you break, and then you try to fix it. That should be the goal. Of course, other people try to do, breaking it and then basically misuse it. In our case, is to find mitigations and strategies on how to go about it, and then future work and key takeaways from Laura. A little bit about motivation. All started basically with this research paper report, I would say, which was written in 2018. I come across to this report in 2019. Basically also with this idea that these powerful tools that were popping up at that time, a lot was coming from DeepMind, from Google Today company, and it was interesting that it was possible, or I could envision that dual use of the technology, especially new technology, is always what we do as human. We do good or evil. It was possible, and then this report actually brings structure to what I thought was feasible in terms of how to malicious use artificial intelligence. It's very interesting because it's very well structured for a group of researchers, and it gives you different ideas of what things could go wrong. So it's not only what we know and we have seen in other presentations, problems in the software or bugs in the pipeline of AI and machine learning, but also the misuse as we see happening today. I mean, the deep fakes, prone injection, and so on. So it's quite good. I mean, it's 5 years old by now, so a lot of things you're going to read there, you're going to say, yeah, of course, it's obvious, because we have seen it happening. Although something I found very interesting is this quote that you have there from the report, is that we need to understand that the vulnerabilities we're going to see are going to be different from the traditional ones if we don't talk about, of course, of the software pipeline itself, like buffer overflows, but it's going to be different because it's how we use the models itself and how humans interact with them. And we will probably see ways that we, as humans, didn't thought about in the malicious way to use them. So then we started this research, and the first step we did was try to replicate existing work. So we were looking around if somebody already was trying to attempt to build an AI-enabled malware. So we were looking at the time of people really embedded AI in the malware to use it. So here is an example for researchers from IBM when they basically use AI to locksmith the payload, the malware inside. So the payload will only be triggered or detonated when the machine learning embedded in the software will find a particular partner in the victim machine. So it will be harder for the reversers to be able to find the point of the detonation because it will require a very specific particular person or device to do that. So we replicate this. We use, in our case, face recognition. So our payload will only be triggered if we show a picture of Mr. Beans. Okay, but nothing, nothing about the person, but to trigger it. And then we also come across to this other work, which is very interesting because it's basically automate with machine learning, potentially pen test using a very common framework, Metasploit. If you're not familiar with the framework, I recommend that you get familiar because the powerful is that there are many exploits already embedded in the tool. And what they did with machine learning is they trained the whole exploits there. So when you ask this automated software for a particular target, you just give an IP address or a domain name. It will profile it and will immediately start the attack with the best exploits for that particular target. So it's super powerful. I mean, we're talking about work already 4 years ago when these exploits exist. So you can imagine that other things are happening by threat actors that, of course, will not be sitting in conference sharing. And then things started to evolve. And then in August 10 of 2021, we got the things called Codex, which basically is an LLM model trained with the whole code of GitHub. And then this was a revolution for me because now it was the first time that you could generate code by just talking to the machine. Okay. So what you see there is in this very simple example is 3 lines that I wrote. You know, create a list of first name, create a list of last name, and then combine them random in a list of 10 full names. And then it generates this code. This code is not perfect, okay, because I set 10 full names and it only does 25. And then you use the 100 for the random range. But anyway, it generates a code that runs in milliseconds. So this was a revelation because thinking again in this mind that it could be dual use. And then what happened with dual use? Then you ask create a simple ransomware and then you get, boom, you get the ransomware. And this is still available today. Of course, somebody in the room can argue, yes, Sergio, you can go to GitHub and get it. Yes, but this is now embedded in the model. It's there. Okay. If you go to GitHub and try to remove these repositories, you're going to be able. Now, try to edit the LLM and remove this is going to be harder. So that's one of the implications we have to keep in mind. And then, of course, ChatGPT came. And we all know the revolution and the power of the tool. And this start now not only accessing everybody, it goes free, it goes in the wild, but we are also embedding this in the organizations as I speak. So here is a code. So I want, in 30 seconds, somebody from the audience to tell me what this code is doing. I will give you a nice Luxembourg Tech School sticker. So what do you think this code is doing? Any hands? I thought you were faster. No pressure. Okay, so guess the number game? Yes? Who agree? Okay, so try not to do this at home, please, because it's going to encrypt all your root folder. Okay? So basically, the first portion of the code is guess the name game, and the second part is basically encrypting your whole root folder. The key is there, so no problem. You have it there at the end. But the beauty of this, again, don't try this at home, please. The beauty of this is this was done with this prompt on ChatGPT. Again, people can say, yes, Sergio, everybody can write this. This is democratizing hacking. Anybody can write this prompt without having a clue of Python. And this code, first I asked to write this Python code, which is guessing the game, and then encrypted all my files on the root folder, and then I tried to hide it, okay? Because it's gonna write encrypting. And then I say, well, replace that word for something like game, you know, game. And it makes basically hiding the whole idea just by typing this sequence prompt that you can try at home, but please don't run the code.
Okay, so now we will continue a little bit on the opportunities with LLM and of course the threats, as has already been mentioned. So we all know ChatGPT, and there are many other large language models available out there. So as we saw already previously, usually the developers of large language models are usually not a security expert. So already there we have the issue that many large language models are not really safe. But also on pages like Hugging Face, for example, anyone can train a model for any specific task and just upload it there. So for example, just for text-to-text models, there are already over 18,000 models available. So pretty sure not those 80,000 models are all perfectly safe. So of course they can be used in everyday, and I think most of us use large language models in everyday. It can be very beneficial, very helpful, but we need to be very careful with those as well. So today we will mostly focus on ChatGPT, and for example, for ChatGPT, we have already also over 900 plugins that are available. So many of those plugins are verified, but verified does not necessarily mean that they are safe. And there are also a whole lot of unverified plugins out there that can still be used. So now we will have a quick look at the threats that are out there. So some threats are by directly using the code. So as Sergio just showed, it's very simple to get, for example, ChatGPT to simply generate some harmful code. So also for fake news generation, I think we have already all seen it, that there also large language models are regularly used. But there have been already many studies. Here's just one example covering a whole lot of malware that can be generated with large language models. And others scary threat is that also there are some data sets that can be very easily poisoned by large language models. Also there have been a few blog posts that have shown how online data set can easily be poisoned, and afterwards people are not necessarily aware that the data set has been poisoned when they use them to train their model. Another problem is, of course, large language models have been trained on a whole amount of data. It shouldn't have been trained on private data, but we all know it still contains some sensitive information. And here we have also seen examples of people jailbreaking the model to actually still access the private data that was contained in the model. We have seen before for some models you can just download the model and see what's in there, but for others you can still access the data by jailbreaking the model. So I've been already talking about jailbreaking. So jailbreaking is basically just tricking the system so that it does not respect the implemented safeguards anymore. Another indirect misuse that we have already been discussing today are prompt injections. So where basically the user, for jailbreaking, there have been also several studies. Since jailbreaking, for example, OpenAI already implemented some safeguards to prevent users from misusing the model. But of course, hackers keep finding new ways of jailbreaking the model. So of course, this is an evolving domain where we need to be up to date in order to jailbreak ChatGPT. So for indirect prompt injections, basically the attacker is able to influence the model's output. So here we have also seen a very interesting and relevant work of some researchers actually compromising LLM integrated applications by prompt injections. And as we all see, LLMs are being integrated in more and more applications, which makes this a huge new attack vector. So with all this interesting work out there, we started thinking, okay, what can we now do? How easily is it actually to generate the malware? And on the other hand, we don't just want to use the web interface of ChatGPT and see that it can generate malware. Because when you want to attack someone, you want, of course, the malware to be automatically executed on the victim's machine. So here was an initial prompt that we used to have ChatGPT also generate some ransomware. So here we basically just ask it to write a Node.js script in this case to encrypt the whole folder, and also afterwards to ask the victim to pay to get the folder decrypted again. And for this prompt, you don't even need to jailbreak ChatGPT. It just did it. So here we can see the resulting code. So here it correctly encrypted the whole folder. It printed out the message that people had to pay, in this scenario, just 5 pieces of candy, so it's still quite cheap to get your key back. But of course, the whole folder is encrypted. But now we wanted to see how can we now automate the process to have the code automatically executed. So this was actually quite easy to just automate the process, to just connect to ChatGPT and run the code. But of course, you don't want to run this on your own machine. So also for this, don't do it at home. But now we were thinking, we have seen that ChatGPT is perfectly capable of generating malware. But can we maybe also use it as a proxy to actually get the malware to the victim? So this is how we came to our RatGPT. So we were just thinking, how can we now actually attack someone using the model? Because we have seen so many works on using the model to generate the malware, but only a few to actually get it to the victim. So here we are with RatGPT to turn online large language models such as ChatGPT as a proxy for malware attacks. So the main question was now, how can we now build a connection from the victim to our command and control server via the large language model? So this was the main challenge, because what we wanted to have at the end, we wanted the large language model to be in the middle, and from the victim, we wanted to automatically send prompts to the LLM, and we wanted the LLM to then go to our command and control server to get the commands, and then we wanted them to be automatically executed on the victim's machine. So really, the idea is quite simple. We just wanted to have an online LLM as a proxy between the attacker and the victim. So now the question is, of course, how could we do that, and what are the key aspects of our attack? So for our attack, we wanted, of course, to have an automated pipeline, because we have seen some attacks with large language models where usually the user still had to directly interact with the model, but then was getting, for example, poisoned answers. But here, there is no need for the victim to actually send any prompts themselves to their language models. And we don't have any direct connection between the attacker and the victim. And what was essential for us, we wanted, of course, to have an executable that gets not detected by antivirus tools. But in our case, our executable basically just contains prompts to ChatGPT. So we tested it in anti-malware tools, and it was all fine. Additionally, since the payload is getting generated on the fly by ChatGPT, we just have in-memory malware, and nothing stays on the victim's machine. And also, since the executable only contains commands, prompts to ChatGPT, so I don't know about you, but I think most of you are using ChatGPT, so usually a connection to ChatGPT is nothing very suspicious. So now for the implementation. So we actually did not need it that much. So of course, for the attacker, we needed to have our command and control server where we could have the commands that we want to perform afterwards on the victim's machine. And for ChatGPT, we only use the web version, not even any need for the API. And so the victim's executable basically just contains prompts to ChatGPT, a little bit of cleanup, and so on, and of course some access tokens. And we will see later on that we also needed to use some plugins and an automated capture solver, because there are a few safeguards in place that we were still able to bypass. So now the first stage, well, as usual, the victim still needs to be tricked to download a simple executable. But I think we all know how easy it is with social engineering to get people to just click a link and get an executable. Especially now with ChatGPT, since there's still the pro version or ChatGPT 4 where you need to pay, you could just say, hey, here's a free version of ChatGPT, have fun, people download it. They don't know anything. Since they don't have to interact with ChatGPT, everything just happens in the background. So as I mentioned, we needed the plugins in our case. So for those that are familiar with using ChatGPT, in March, actually, ChatGPT enabled a browsing feature, which after 1 week got disabled because they realized was very safe. So, okay, but as mentioned previously, there are over 900 plugins out there, and we know that many of those plugins are able to still access the web. So in our case, what we needed, so we called it kind of like vulnerability criteria. It's not really vulnerable, but it's just what we needed in order to use it for our attack. So on one hand, we needed to be able to browse the web, and secondly, we needed to be able to go to any user-specific URL, because also now browsing has been reactivated by ChatGPT, but only to specific websites. So the plugins, we found a couple of verified plugins that we could use and redirect to the address of our command and control server. So we needed a plugin in order to perform our attack. So now to start the attack, in the very first step is automatically we have some prompt initialization. So we were also using the jailbreak for ChatGPT. So here, what was essential, since we wanted to automate the whole attack, and usually ChatGPT, when you ask it a question, it gives you a whole lot of explanation and text, but we needed the output to be directly executable. So here, we used the modified jailbreak in order to comment all the parts that we did not need it, and to only keep like values, as in this example, or code really as it is, so that it is directly executable as soon as we get the reply from ChatGPT. So in order to establish a connection to our command and control server, obviously we did not hard-code the IP address in the executable. I mean, that would be stupid, and of course this would immediately be flagged. So we had to figure out a way for ChatGPT to generate the IP address of the command and control server. So how could we do that? Well, we were thinking first, usually when you think numbers, you think mathematics. So we investigate a little bit on how ChatGPT was reacting to mathematical questions. So you can see here, for example, what is the tens value of the Fibonacci sequence? Well, there is a clear answer, but every time we ask ChatGPT, we get a different answer. So sometimes not even the correct answer after many attempts. So this is bad. And of course, this is not reliable. So this, we knew we could not go with this kind of questions to build our IP address. So then we thought, yeah, actually for like historical facts, there, ChatGPT had a huge amount of data which always contained the exact same number. So then we just gave it a few examples. Here's one, you will see a few more later, where no matter how many times we asked ChatGPT, it always gave us the correct answer. So here we go. We had found a way to have ChatGPT generate all the different parts of the IP address that we needed in order to establish a connection. So now that we have the IP address, then we know where we need to connect to. Of course, we want to be able to attack more than just one victim. Otherwise, we could just, would not be very useful. So in order to have a correct connection between the command and control and the victim, we needed, of course, to generate a unique user ID. And we needed to define a little bit how the whole connection should work and how often. So usually with ChatGPT, you're a little bit limited how many requests you can send and how fast you can send them. So here, we just limited the amount of time, how many time we were waiting between every prompt to ChatGPT. So basically, once the connection is established, there are many possible attacks, and you will see an example in a demo in a moment. So basically, once you have control, you can just have a look at all the data that is on the victim's machine. Of course, you can afterwards do some privilege escalation, and basically you have full control over the machine afterwards. So now, in our case, once we have the connection established, from the victim's machine, we send a prompt to our large language models, which will go to our command and control server, read the command, and then the command gets returned to the victim, where it gets automatically executed on the machine. Depending on the command, if data needs to get sent back, we just reuse the address of our command and control server, just append the data afterwards, and we have full access to the machine. So we can now see in a little demo how this works. So on the top part, you will have the victim's machine simulated, and at the bottom part, you will have the attacker. So basically, once the executable gets launched, we will see in a moment in the top part. It is started, yes. Okay, so now we can see that the login was successful and that we started the jailbreak. So as mentioned before, the jailbreaking is essential, and we needed to modify it in order to have everything that is not a value or a code to be commented. So here we can see now the jailbreak is done, and we start generating the IP address. So here, for example, we used one question: in which year did the Berlin Wall fall? So also here, ChatGPT was quite reliable in its generation. So we will see here a few examples in order to build the whole IP address. So as mentioned previously, we focused only on historical dates to ensure that the IP address would be generated successfully. And for the rest, we just had some basic code to put everything together, but just basic string concatenation wasn't very complicated to implement. So now that we have the IP address, we start generating the payload. So the payload contains, of course, the whole connection, the whole communication between the victim and the attacker. So now we see on the attacker side that a new connection has been added, and I'm going to pause here for a second. So now we can see that currently we have only one victim, and we can see here the unique identifier of the victim. And now the attacker can start writing a first command. He chooses the victim that he wants to attack, and he sends a first command. So this command is now put on the command and control server, where the prompt that we had previously to ChatGPT. So from the victim's machine, we will every few seconds be reading the new commands on our server through the large language model. So here we have a first command, and now we can see that the victim received the command from the large language model, and then it got automatically executed on the victim's machine. And now we can see that it appended the result to the link back to that was then sent again as prompt to ChatGPT. And now on the attacker's machine, we can decode the message, and we can see that the user, in this case was Mika, we have the path and everything else we needed. So now that we know this, we can perform a new command, which will again be on our command and control server. And from there, a new prompt to ChatGPT from the victim's machine will read the new command, and it will again be automatically executed on the victim's machine. And in a new prompt to ChatGPT, we will again access the result from the command. And here, for demonstration purpose, we just created this password file just as demonstration, because of course we didn't want it here to perform a more severe attack, but we just wanted to show that we were able to establish the connection between the victim and our command and control server just by using a large language model as a proxy in between. So here, what was very scary is that it was very simple to implement it. So all we needed was ChatGPT. We needed one automatic capture solver, because this was one of the safeguards that we saw, and the jailbreaks that was also helpful. But this is basically all we needed. So afterwards, the most work was to get the prompt right, so that really ChatGPT was generating the correct payload. But coding-wise, there were only basic Python skill required to do this attack. So this is quite scary, and now Sergio will take over on what we can now do about it.
Thank you, Laura. So don't try this at home. So a little bit on some mitigation strategies. That's part of the ongoing work that we are looking into it. I listed 6 here. I will only cover 5 for time issue, but basically looking into blocking it, just block it. That's what we do in life. We block things that we don't know and we don't know what to do with it. Regulation, disclosure, prompting scanning, certification, and AI red teaming. So a little bit blocking the generative AI. So if we do that, of course, we stop misuse and harm because there is no way to do it because it's not there. We protect privacy, we protect discrimination, and we comply with the law. So yeah, fantastic. At the same time, we will limit creativity and speech freedom. Innovation will not happen. We don't have a way to continue to develop and a positive use of application as we see, for example, healthcare and other domains. Potential cascade of unintended consequences because, again, we will not be able to continue to develop this technology, and for sure people will circumvent, as we know. Whatever you ban, people will circumvent. So then let's look into AI regulation. This is a very, very hot topic at the moment. We are in Europe, so we are heavily linked and close to the EU AI Act, which is setting down the first steps to start really working on regulation, looking into especially high-risk systems. Systems, for example, in healthcare will be considered high risk because there are life at stake. Some things will be prohibited, okay? Data quality and training because the model is as good as the data that we create. Conformity and assessment, you need to do some testing on the model. We just deploy the models and pray that nobody misusing. And penalties on informants. So if we don't put some penalty informant, people will just not follow the regulation. And there is similar work happening here in this part of the world, in the US. I think in this case, Europe is a little bit more advanced. Again, this is, as I call, paper theory, okay? This is just the first step to try to do something because then regulation have to follow, and then we have to see how we balance innovation and creativity versus regulation. Another important consideration is that it's going to be hard to do it because at the time we get a regulation now, probably the technology have already completely changed, but we need to work on this. Coordinated vulnerability disclosure. I'm happy to hear that now Microsoft is going to do a bug bounty program on AI. I don't know the details, but for us it was very difficult to report this to OpenAI, for example. There is no way you can do it. You actually cannot report this, okay? This is out of scope, this type of attack. So we believe something has to be really happening to open disclosure of this type of attack. So what we just did a preprint of the paper with no details, at least to make aware whoever read it, do something, block your models so this type of attack cannot be performed. Prompt scanning is an obvious one. Because, of course, the idea is to build a secondary group of LLMs that will analyze those prompts to try to detect potentially maluse. This is happening already, including Microsoft, that is being worked out to build these other models that are going to basically assess the prompts to do some assessment and kind of whitelisting or blacklisting on the content on that prompt. So that leads to prompt analysis, to do red flag, to do verification, and of course this will be a continuous process because humans are humans, so we will always try to find ways to bypass the controls. But we need to put some control on top of this prompt by using prompt scanning. AI red teaming, that's my favorite one. I strongly believe on the concept of red teaming, and especially on AI, which require a complete different set of skills. So that's the advantage or the interest that bring to the community, that we need to start develop this new elite of hackers that understand how these models works, and how we can break them, and then if you are able to break them, then we probably start to understand how to fix them. So I'm a strong believer of the use of AI red teaming. It has some difficulties because, of course, scalability is very difficult. I mean, organizations like Microsoft have the luxury financially to bring the bright people, but not everybody has the capacity to do that. So, of course, there's going to be challenges on how we build those AI red teamings for protecting this type of language models or any other generative AI. But nevertheless, we need to put that on the table and start working on that. And with this, I'm going to hand over to Laura for the very last part.
So we have seen today a basic proof of concept of our idea to use the LLM as a proxy for malware attacks. So as I mentioned previously, we, for example, did not hard-coded, of course, the IP address, and we also used base 64 encryption, encoding for plain text. But if we would have a look at our executable, for example, the prompt to ChatGPT, it bypassed all antivirus tools. But if any person that receives the executable would actually have a look at it and just read the prompt, it would, of course, still be clear what the code is doing. So in future, to really hide this kind of attack, we would need some prompt obfuscation so that it's not clear to the user, to the human, because currently our attack is still human detectable. And other part is we have seen before what kind of code ChatGPT can generate. In our proof of concept, we just listed the directory. We just had a look at the password file, for example. But here, I'll leave it as an open question. Can it easily be converted into ransomware? I'm not going to go into the details. I'll leave it up as question. Of course, I think that here, as Sergio mentioned, it's very important to consider mitigation strategies to avoid really things like RatGPT to be seriously exploited. So here, probably there are easy ways to extend it to perform all kind of other attacks, but we didn't actually perform them. So we kept the proof of concept here quite simple. Another current limitation is still that by ChatGPT, we are a little bit limited by the amount of prompts that we can send. So for an easy attack, it is working, but then future work, there could be some more testing, how far we actually can push the attack and how long we can actually keep this connection. Also, our research was now just focused on ChatGPT to get one proof of concept, but we did not test it yet with other openly available large language models. But since the general idea is similar, I guess that it might also work for other large language models, but it has not been tested for the moment. So in general, as key takeaways, it was very simple to build this first malicious proof of concept. So here, we really want to raise awareness that we need to do something to really keep large language models secure, because it's very easy to really exploit them. So LLMs can really enhance their cyber kill chain, unfortunately. So we have really to do something about this. So as Sergio mentioned a few years ago when we started already this research, it was already revolution how all of the sudden Codex was able to generate just some simple executable code. So I feel that with the rapid growth of AI, it's very, very important that as community we come together, and of course we need a good way to actually report and manage the discovery of such vulnerabilities to really ensure that the exploits are being reported and that they can be fixed so that we can all really benefit from the opportunities of large language models and safely use them. So with that, thank you very much for listening to our RatGPT presentation.
Thank you.